Hey, this is another TBT. I haven't actually pre-watched this one. I had pre-watched the previous ones, so I knew what I wanted to talk about. I can guess because the 3 games that I've watched so far have all had the same problem, which is that your army size just tends to be really small, and then you do aggressive things with that very small army, and it's just silly. You don't want to be fighting with a small army on purpose. So this is you. My guess is that at 10 minutes you're going to have like a $2,000 army instead of a $4,000 army, and then some sort of battle is going to happen and you're just going to lose that battle really heavily, and then the game's going to continue for a long time, but it's not going to matter because you already lost that first battle. So there's a reason that whenever you look up a build, like if you go and you just Google audio builds Thorazane TVT, this one, right? Anytime you look up a build, what it's going to be is what do you do for the first 10 minutes? And it's going to give you a $3,000 to $4,000 army and between 40 and 52 workers. And that army is going to change around a lot depending on your composition and what you're trying to get done. Like it might be a Marine medevac army, it might be a Marine tank army, it might be a mech army. But whatever it is, the first 10 minutes is all about getting that army out. You're trying to get between 40 and 52 workers and between 3,500 and 44,000 army, right? So about 100 supply. So a lot of the people you're going to face on the ladder are going to be using things like this, audio builds. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but it's really cool. Basically, click here to start the build. There you go.
Your build will begin in 5.
So it just tells you
4,
like you can just play this
2,
in the background
1.
and then do it, and it'll give you the perfect army. So audio builds is awesome. You should totally try this out. So it'll say build an SCV. Come on.
Train an SCV.
And then beep, beep, when it's time to actually train it. And at the end of the build, you're going to end up with about 100 supply at 10 minutes. See, it's 10 minutes, 108 supply, all Marines and medevacs, with a 3rd command center on the way and 52 workers and stim completed and siege mode on the way, and like it's a really good build. And there are lots of really good builds. You don't have to use that one specifically. You can just pick any of them. So your opponents, at least if they're decent, are going to tend to have that big, strong 10-minute time. And so in the lower leagues, what you really want to do is learn how to survive those sorts of 10-minute pushes or do one of your own. And then after that is when people just kind of fall apart because they memorize this really good build that got them a really strong army at 10 minutes, but then after 10 minutes they just kind of don't know what to do, or they know generally what to do but they can't keep up because it just takes, the game takes a lot more APM and a lot more attention the longer into it you go, the further into it you go. So anyway, 10 minutes, we got 42 workers. We kind of want 52 with a fast expand build, so we're about 10 behind, but 42 still isn't terrible. Obviously it could be better, and I would love for you to be perfect on workers, but I feel like you have bigger problems. So do focus on making enough workers, but 42 is good. You know, it's not terrible. The big problem is army size. You've got a $2,000 army size. Stim is just finishing now. Combat shields is not finished. +1 is not finished. You got 3 bunkers. This is a little bit silly because if he does a tank push, bunkers aren't going to help you. You got a siege tank coming in siege mode. Specifically in TVT, bunkers aren't super useful. It's good to get 1 early on, and if you know he's 1 base all inning, it's good to get a second one. But other than that, you should really just stick to 1, and you should even salvage it once you have tanks. So you just have $2,000 of army and no completed research, right? So instead of the 108 supply that the Thorazane build would have gotten you, you've got 78 supply. And let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So you've got $1,200 spent on stuff that no matter what is not going to be part of the first fight, and that's really bad. The reason that you see me get turret rings so often is because I'm economically ahead. I do a build that's greedy, that's going to put me economically ahead, and then I get a turret ring. So getting the turret ring takes away from my army, and that's bad. But because I have more workers than you, I'm not trying to win a fight at a specific time. I'm just trying to live until my economic advantage can play out. So in this case, you're kind of in that same boat. He's on 1 base, you're on 2 base. Your income is vastly bigger than his. So what you want to do is just survive the first attack. So in cases like this, turret rings do make sense. But your turret ring isn't right. And your army is pretty small. So what I mean by isn't right, he can drop you right here. He can drop you right here. He can... that's about it. So you just need like 1-2 more turrets, and you're completely immune to drops. But the point of a turret ring is to allow you to leave your base. And if you don't have stim and you don't have +1 and you don't have medevacs, you weren't going to leave your base anyway. So you can defend your base with marines. You don't need turrets yet. So what you want to do is split your army, half your army here and half your army here, and keep a dude out to scout in case he does a frontal push. But you have the bunkers if he does a frontal push anyway. So if he doesn't drop, you'll have your army right there and you'll kill the drop. So then you can save that $1,200 you spent on bunkers and turrets, $800, and instead spend it on army, and that'll give you a much bigger army, and that's a big deal, and that's great. So don't turret ring until you're about to leave. So if you're attacking him, that's when you need to turret ring, because you don't want to get dropped while you're attacking him. But you don't want to turret ring when you're just sitting home defending, because wouldn't you rather have a crap ton more marines than a turret ring? So you're actually doing a lot better than him in this fight, and you have a much bigger army than him. If you survive, I feel like you win. Just looking up at the money, you've got more than $2,000 in the bank, so this is obviously really bad. But I think you're just going to win the game anyway, because you expanded and he didn't, and then he failed to get something done with his first push. So I believe you're going to win this game from here, but I would just like to say that even though you're going to win, it was pretty bad army size-wise. At 10 minutes, you really want to have about 100 supply of marines, and you had way less, $2,000 instead of 4,000, so about half as many marines as you should have. So I assume you're going to win from here. Let's watch you win. Just kind of fast forward on first person view and watch you kill somebody, because why not? Doobie doobie doo. So one thing that you'll note is that when you're microing, when this dude is attacking you and you're trying not to die, several things are going to drop off. You're going to forget to make marines and air units and tanks and stuff. So these units, these buildings are eventually going to go idle. So you got an idle racks here and an idle racks here and whatever. Your money is going to pile up. You're going to forget to make supply depots. You're going to often forget to make workers, and more importantly, you're going to forget to add additional infrastructure. So sometimes even if none of those things happens, even if you keep up on workers, you keep up on production, and you keep up on depots, your money still piles up, just because you don't have the time while you're fighting to say, oh, I need another rack. So you end up going 3 minutes with needing another racks, and each one of those minutes you're falling $250 behind because you should have been building stuff out of a racks that you never built. So there's this temptation after the fight ends to say, holy cow, I have 2,000 minerals, I'm going to throw down 1,000,000 raxes and factories and raxes and factories. And that's a little bit bad. It is important when money starts to pile up to say, oh, well, there's no way I'm going to spend this money on the infrastructure I have. I need to add additional infrastructure. But you should have certain numbers in your head and never really go past them. And if your money builds up when you're at the peak production that you should make on the number of bases you're on, add command centers rather than anything else. So on one base, the most you want is 3 raxes. You should never get more than 3 raxes on one base. And all of them should have add-ons, by the way. You should usually be on 2 raxes with add-ons and sometimes go on 3 with add-ons, but you should never have more than that on one base. On 2 bases, your max raxes should be 5 raxes with 5 add-ons. So usually people go 2-1-1 and then 5-2-1. So never get more than 5 raxes, 2 factories, and 1 starport on 2 bases. So if you end up with 5 raxes, 2 factories, and a starport already on 2 bases, and you have 2,000 minerals and very little gas, it's tempting to throw down these raxes, but instead just throw down 2 command centers and make sure to not supply block and to keep up on Marine production and spend your money that way. The reason I say command centers is because you didn't fall behind because you don't have enough Raxes. You fell behind because you weren't using the Raxes you had. You fell behind because you were in a fight. In this specific case, you did fall behind because you never built an add-on on this third Rax, and you supply blocked and you weren't using your buildings and stuff. But just in general, keep that in mind, man. It's always better to have additional command centers because you can land them and win the game. Also, never take geysers if you're not going to use them. It's a little obvious. I'm sure you meant to use them and just didn't. Also, you should stay a lot further ahead on supply than you're doing. So, you remember that we talked about this budget concept, right? Each minute in the early game you're spending $500 a minute, and then in the mid game you're spending $750, and then in the late game you're spending $1,000, right? You never really get to a point until you've completely cut workers where you can spend more than $1,000 a minute. Even though it's weird, because if you look at your income, you actually have a $1,600 income, and you're like, so why am I not spending $1,600 a minute on army? And the answer is supply depots and workers, and additional command centers and bunkers and turrets and all that other crap. So you kind of want to budget for 500 and 750 then 1,000 for most of the game, at least the first 15 minutes. And this is... Oh, dude, I totally forget why I was saying this. Oh, yeah, this is relevant because if you think of supply depots per dollar, right? You say, okay, in the beginning I'm spending $500 a minute. How many supply depots is that, right? $500 of Marines, for example, is 10 Marines. How many depots do you need for 10 Marines and 4 SCVs? 2, right? That means 1 depot every 30 seconds, and depots take 30 seconds to build, so you want one guy constantly producing depots. Once you get double that income on 2 bases, your budget goes up to 750 rather than doubling. So now you need actually 1.5 SCVs constantly producing depots. And then once you're up to 1,000, you need two SCVs constantly producing depots. So basically, you want to count on screwing up for a full minute every once in a while. So you want to have enough depots so that if you completely forget to build depots for a full minute, you don't supply block. And that means in the early game you want to be, you want to be 16 supply ahead? And not the super early game, but like from 7 minutes to 9 minutes. You want to be like 2 depots ahead. Well, 1.5 or whatever. And then the more money per minute you're spending on army, the further ahead you have to be on depots. So in the late game, you want to be about 20 supply ahead of depots. And let's look over here. So you can see in this Thorzane build that like actual professional StarCraft player Thorzane is showing us. He's 35 supply ahead. No, he's 26 supply ahead. So, I mean, don't be afraid to overbuild depots. Even Thorzane does it. Is the point. So yeah, in the beginning try to stay 10 supply ahead, in from the 8 to 12 minute mark try to stay 15 supply ahead, and then in the late game try to be 20 supply ahead, 20 to 25. Yeah, anyway, let's watch you win now. Sorry, I know I said I was going to watch you win. I probably should have just let that roll while I was talking. But I gesticulate, man, and when you're on a computer you can't gesticulate with your hands because they can't see you, so you have to do it with the mouse and showing things. Now you're doing a doom drop. Again, your income is just so high that it almost doesn't matter. What happens? You've spent double him on army. You lost a big army there. I could look at why that happened. Hang on. Okay, so first thing, attitude. In TVT, there is nothing faster than stimmed infantry. Nothing. No, I mean, Hellions are faster, but that doesn't count because they can't actually kill you or chase you down or do anything scary, because you, especially if you have Marauders, but even if you don't have Marauders, Marines with combat shields and stim do fine at preventing Hellions from doing much. So, and also your opponent isn't going Hellions. So anyway, point is, once you have stim and medevacs, you can just walk around the field. Now, it's important never to walk anywhere but this direct path straight to your opponent, because if you walked over here and then he attacks you, Now all you can do is come home. So he gets to do free damage, and then you come in behind him, and maybe he floats away and loses nothing, or maybe you kill him, but either way he did some free damage. So you always want to cover the attack path to your opponent when your army is moving, but as long as you stay on the attack path, the default attack path to your opponent, there's no reason to do a drop over here when you could just take your whole army and walk over here. Because think about it, what if your opponent's entire army is right here and you don't have vision of it, and you load up your whole army into medevacs and then you go and drop it in his base, and at the same time when you're halfway over to dropping him, his army is walking up to you and he just stims and kills your front, and now he kills your whole base, and all you have is your drop in his base, and he fights it off with the reinforcements and you lose. Basically the point is that first, your goal is to get lots of money. Second, your goal is to spend that money in such a way that you always have a bigger army than your opponent. And then third is you're trying to make sure that no matter who attacks who where, you always have a larger army in that local engagement. So if you take every single unit you have and you load it up into a dropship, that's one thing. Because now, if he attacks you and then you drop in his base, now it's a base trade, and that's good, because our assumption is that you have a bigger army. So if you're base trading with him, then at the end your armies fight and you win. So that's great. But if you take not all of your army, if you take 4 dropships but not everything, like you did, you're doing the same thing that you've done in all of these games that I've criticized, which is you're splitting your army up into little chunks. So now, if he has his whole army versus half of your army, he crushes you, and then he walks over to your base and he crushes you again. So I believe that the reason that you're doing this, making this mistake of doing this drop, like look, at this point your army is vastly bigger than his. Your army supply is double him, and yet you're taking half of your army and you're going to go attack his entire army with it. So all of this stuff is stuck back in your base. Now, the reason you're doing this is because you're afraid that when you do this drop, he'll counterattack and kill your base. But if you think about it, if you have a bigger army, and you attack him at the same time as he attacks you, both of you will kill each other's bases, and then you'll win the game because you have a bigger army. So this fear that you have that he's going to attack you when you're attacking him is unfounded. If he attacks you, good, you win. So you want him to attack you. What you don't want is for him to not attack you and then be over-prepared for something that never happens. Right? That will lose you the whole game. So in this case, first of all, don't send your medevacs over here where you can't unload them if he has Vikings that all shoot him. Second, you're not walking over the main attack path, so he could theoretically counterattack without you being at his base yet, and then you could theoretically run into a bunch of turrets here and be forced to pull back, which means that now you're not doing damage while he is doing damage. And then third, always have your army in a giant ball. Death ball is your friend. Never split your army into multiple pieces. I mean, it works for pro players in specific situations where they really know what they're doing. And you're not a pro player, and I don't think your goal is to be a pro player, so don't make shit like that up, and don't do it. Don't do it, man. So, I know that it's not even worth spending this much time on such an obvious point, but basically, at this point, you have double his army size, and you lose a fight. That should never happen. If you have double his army size, and you guys fight, you should win, by definition, man. So, yeah, we've seen this problem from you in all of these games now, so not super surprising that we see it again. You did kill his PF, and that wasn't worth it, by the way, if you look at... Now you have a third and he doesn't, but you are already so far ahead that there's no need to take such a huge risk, because if his PF had lived with 1 hit point and you'd lost your whole army in exchange, then that would be really, 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 really bad, man. So, the only time you should attack a PF with infantry, with stuff that can't hit it without taking damage, is if you know his army is nowhere nearby. And this PF, for example, the place that he put this PF is really good, because if you attack this base, then you're violating the cardinal rule of always walking down the primary attack path towards his base. That means that you could theoretically attack this base at the same time as he counterattacked this base, and his counterattack would win the game, whereas your attack would just knock down an expo. So that would be very bad. So this base, the position he put this base in, It's very tempting to attack it because it's not along the primary attack path, which makes it hard for him to defend. But don't ever attack this. Don't ever attack this position. You always just want to be walking from your natural to his natural in every game, in every matchup. Just walking from his natural, your natural to his natural, and have a bigger army. And then you don't need to worry about any of this flanking and dropping and nonsense. So you're doing the same thing again. You've left a whole bunch of stuff back home so that if he does counterattack, you're completely safe. And then you're trying to kill him with the excess army you have. And I suspect it's going to win, but again, it's only going to win because you're 30 supply ahead, because you've got $6,000 in the bank, because you're massively ahead in this game, and there's nothing he could really do to screw it up. This is just so wrong. Don't do this. This is not what StarCraft is about, man. StarCraft 2 is all about death balls. It is about what he is doing. Your whole army should be on one hotkey, and it should all move from one location to another location and back and forth. Don't split it up into lots of pieces. So this what you're doing here, this is a very Brood War-ish type thing to do, right? You put a couple of dudes in a location, and that forces him to attack it. But if we look at army lost, units lost, before this fight you're up 600, and after this fight you're down 200. So that he just went massively in his favor. That fight was a huge win for him. And then, yes, you can poke in here and do some damage, but again, after both of those fights, including that counterattack, you're still basically even, so you fell down 600. So baiting someone in one direction and then attacking in with another army is a good tactic, and that was very clever of you, and it did work, and that you did knock down his third, and it did starve him, and that did, you know, win you the game. But remember, this is a game that you had already won. You won this game in the very, very beginning when you were already up 30 supply and 25 workers and so on and so forth. So that kind of tricksy tactic, when it works, it makes you look like a genius, and in this case, it worked really well, and it did make you look really cool. But when it fails, you lose your whole army over here, then you lose your whole army over here, and you gain nothing, and you wonder to yourself, why did I put all those units in that position? And then again, holding a watchtower, 6 guys, same kind of deal. Attacking into his whole army with 3 tanks, same kind of deal. So I'm going to predict that in this fight against this huge army, this specific tank is not going to get to do anything. That is my prediction, sir. So again, he's deathballing. He's putting his whole army on one hotkey and putting it all in one place and doing cool things with it. And you're not. You have a little tiny army, which is the portion of your army you've said to yourself, it's okay if these guys die. These are my harassing force. And you never want to fight his entire army with this little tiny group. That's just completely silly. If you look, again, right now, he is 30 supply up, and that's really stupid that he's up 30 supply, because I guess why do you not like to put add-ons on your racks? Your whole base is filled with these buildings that combined can't spend your entire budget, and then you build a bunch more racks with no add-ons. It's just a waste of space, man. Every rack should always have an add-on. Every building you make should always have an add-on at all times. There are cute, clever little things that pro players do where sometimes there's a specific build that spends all their money without needing an add-on on one specific building. But those are not things you should be worried about until you're in Masters League, basically. Every building you make should always have an add-on. So if you look at army spending, you've spent 3,000 more than him, but each time he's putting his whole army up against a tiny chunk of your army, so he's done double your damage. Because each one of these fights is going massively in his favor. And you might even lose this game, even though you were so far ahead. That's really funny. So at this point, you only have one mining base. You only have 21 workers, and you're not really mining at your one mining base, so that's really bad. You're eventually going to spend your backlog of monies, but then again, what are you doing? You take a little tiny chunk of troops and you move out. Like, why would you do that? Oh, so bad. So this is a very, very Zerg type thing to do, right? You're trying to pick off reinforcements, and these guys are being pretty efficient, but that just means you don't have any guys over here. Oh, okay, so your opponent should never have attacked these two bases that aren't mining, right? There's no reason for him to have done that. So you got lucky in that your opponent made a huge mistake and just kind of walked into a bunch of bunkers and siege tanks. What he should have done instead, though, if you look, this tank, if he takes his whole army and attacks this tank, 2 tanks are shooting at him. So it dies with only getting 1 shot off. And then this tank, there would only be 2 tanks. So again, dies without it and dies without it. And this is dead. Now you're completely not mining, and then he just sits there and waits for you to leave. He's like, why are you still in this game? You should leave. Yeah. Anyway, you kind of won this game because he made a huge blunder and then left. But at this point, you're dead, and he's got tons of money coming in, tons of production. He should have stayed, and he should have won. Like, look at this. Your whole army is nothing. I mean, your whole army that you're willing to fight with is nothing. You have a big army back home, but you're not going to take it out of your base. So it was silly of him to leave at this point. He's actually in a better position than you. So yeah, again, this game stopped being worth watching when he won based and you 2-based, and he failed to kill you. So right around 10 minutes, he made a really silly push. If you remember, the goal is to have a 10-minute, 108 supply army. This is 11 minutes, a whole extra minute, and he's only got a 75 supply army. It was just silly. He kind of all-in'd you, but really badly. You get to kill tons of units, he goes home, now you're way ahead. And it went reasonably from there. Anyway, so same problem this game as in all the other games. Don't split your army up.